So today we're going to look at the basics of sine graphs. So sine graphs and cosine graphs are oscillating graphs because they move up and down, up and down, up and down. So in order to graph these, we're only going to be looking at the amplitude and the period to help us sketch the graph of the sine and the cosine functions. So today we're going to look at the sine function only. So the first thing we need to know is, what is an amplitude? The amplitude is the distance from the x-axis to the highest point or the x-axis to the lowest point. So this distance is going to be the amplitude. And the amplitude is found by the number that it's in front, and it's the absolute value. So for instance here, if it's a half, the one that's in gray, it's going to be a half up and a half down. If it's a positive 4, that means, which is going to be a negative 4. Negative 4, remember the negative means that it reflects. So you're going to go now down 4 and up 4. So if you notice that all these graphs, the white, the red, the teal, the gray, and the blue, they all start at 0 because we're not going to do any shifting. So we're only looking at the amplitude and the period. So it's the sine graphs will always start at 0 and either go up, or if it's a negative, it will go down. So we're going to look at these. The next thing we're going to do is find the period. So if you remember when we talked about the graphs and when it starts to repeat, when we're looking at the unit circle, it starts to repeat after every 2 pi. So the period for a regular sine function without any transformation, the period is going to be 2 pi. But because we're going to have another value where it's either going to compress it or stretch it, what we're going to do to find the period, we are going to take the period, which we know for sine is 2 pi, and we're going to divide it by the coefficient of the x value. So it's going to be in this format. Y is equal to a sine of bx. So that's going to be the coefficient of the variable. So this is the general form that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to look at the a, which is our amplitude, and our b, which we're going to get our period from. So to graph these functions, we're going to need a couple things. So let's start off with the first one. So notice that the a value here is 1. So that's the amplitude. The period is going to be 2 pi, and this is a, over our b value. And here it's 1, so it's just 2 pi. Now, in order to graph a full interval, you need 5 marks, 5 points. So to make it easier for us, we are going to take our period and divide it by 4 always. So 2 pi over 4, simplified, is going to be pi over 2. That's going to help us because that tells us the width between one to the next. It's going to be pi over 2. So remember, because it's a sine function starts at 0, 0. Because a is positive, we're going to go up on the graph. So we are going to start at 0. Remember that our width is pi over 2, so our next tick mark is going to be at pi over 2. We're going to add another pi over 2, which is 2 pi over 2. Add another pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. And add another one, which is 4 pi over 2. Notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tick marks. So remember that I said at the beginning, this is an oscillating graph. So if it's oscillating, that means that it has to go up, down through the x-axis, down, and then back up. But the highest and lowest it can go is 1 and negative 1. So at pi over 2, we're going to put it at 1 because notice, sine of pi over 2, that would give us 1. Then we're going to go down to the x-axis, and that would be pi. So sine of pi is 0. Then at 3 pi over 2 is going to be negative 1, because remember, sine of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. And then back up to 2 pi, and sine of 2 pi is 0. So if you notice, our graph is oscillating. And this graph is going to continue doing the same thing. It's going to keep going. Okay, but this here is one full period from start to end. That's one full period. And that's what I need you to graph. I just need you to graph one period. Now look at the domain. Remember that I said it keeps on going? So the domain here is going to be from negative infinity to infinity. And the range, the highest it can go is 1, and the lowest it can go is negative 1. So I am including these points, so negative 1 to 1. And that would be the range. Let's try the next one. Now notice the next one, the A value is still 1, because remember we're taking the absolute value. The period, that's our B value, okay, would be 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. Remember the subinterval is the period divided by 4, which is 2 pi over 4, which gives us pi over 2. Now, very important with this negative. This negative means that we have to go down. So first point is 0. Next point is pi over 2. 2 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2. You need to make sure that you have a total of 5 spaces, so 5 tick marks. So then we're going to start at 0, 0. Remember, the highest you can go is 1, the lowest is negative 1. But this time we're going to go down because there's a reflection. So negative sine of pi over 2, sine of pi over 2 is 1 times the negative is negative 1. Then we're going to go back up because sine of pi is 0 times negative is still 0. And then, and I put a 2, that's a 2 there. 3 pi over 2, I apologize. And sine of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1, but times a 1, negative 1 is still 1. And then it will be 0. So here is one full interval. And remember that it is going to continue. So the domain is negative infinity to infinity. The range is from negative 1 to 1. Good job. Okay, let's try the next one. Now notice here the amplitude. This is our A value. This is our B value. So our amplitude is 2. So the period would be 2 pi over 1, which is our B, which is just 2 pi. Our subinterval, remember we take our period and divide it by 4. So in this case, it's pi over 2. So again, we're always going to start at 0, pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, because we're adding pi over 2 here. So 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2. Notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tick marks. Now this time it's going to go as high as 2 and as low as negative 2, because that was the amplitude. We're going to start at 0. This is an oscillating graph, so it's going to go up, down, down, and then back up. And notice here, there's our graph. And again, it's going to continue. We're just doing one full period, so negative infinity to infinity. But this time the range is from negative 2 to 2, because it's going to go as high as 2, but as low as negative 2. Let's look at the next one here. Notice the amplitude here is 1. This is our B value, so it'd be 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. Our subinterval would be pi over 4. So we're going to start at 0, but this time we're adding pi over 4. So this is pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4. And notice that we ended at pi, which is our period. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marks. This is going to go as high as 1 and as low as negative 1. We're going to start at 0. This is increasing because it's still positive. So sine of pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. So then we're going to go ahead and plug it in. So sine of 2 times pi over 4, which is pi over 2, and sine of pi over 2 is 1. And then we're going to go back down. Notice the pattern. It is going up and down. It's oscillating. And notice again, there is our graph. And again, it's going to go up and down, up and down. Let me graph that a little bit better because I passed one there. And then it's going to keep going. So again, domain is negative infinity to infinity. Range is from -1 to 1. Let's do the next one here. The sine function. This is the a value, which is 3. Our b value is 4, so 2 pi divided by 4, which would give me pi over 2. And then our subinterval would be pi over 2 divided by 4, which remember, you change the division to multiplication and you take the reciprocal, which is pi over 8. So this time we're starting at 0, but this time it's the distance, that width is pi over 8. The next one would be 2 pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, and 4 pi over 8. And if you notice, 4 pi over 8 is pi over 2, which is our period. So this time it's going to go as high as 3, as low as -3, because that's our amplitude. So we start at 0. This is still increasing. So at pi over 8 times 4 is pi over 2. Sine of pi over 2 is 1 times 3 is 3. Notice that it is going to oscillate. So it is going to go up and down again. So you got to make sure that every mark has a point, and then you go ahead and graph it. The domain is negative infinity to infinity, and the range is from -3 to 3. Good job. Just make sure to continue practicing this.